Imagine a scenario where Adam Schefter approaches an NFL player and tells them that an unnamed NFL owner had approached him needing $25,000 to throw a surprise birthday party. And if the player gave him that cash, he'd give it to the owner and would see a hefty profit of 100% interest on the loan. It sounds preposterous, right? Even if you take out the characters involved, it just sounds like a huge, massive scam. Yet this is exactly what happened in the National Football League during the 1990s. The original Pro Football Insider Fred Edelstein talked players, agents, and countless other individuals into investing with him by name-dropping owners and other prominent figures who he just happened to receive loans from. We're talking the likes of Carmen Policy, Dave Weinstead, to name a few. The issue here is that those investments were simply going to be used to pay off other people who had given him money under the same guise. Well, that and also to support his Rolex-wearing, designer suit-flaunting lifestyle. Make no mistake, this was a Ponzi scheme. Now, it was an informal one. Bernie Madoff, this was not, but this was a Ponzi scheme involving the NFL. It's one of the league's stranger tales and one that has largely been forgotten, much like Fred Edelstein himself. But today, we're going to recount that time the NFL's original insider got NFL players and coaches and agents and whatnot to invest in his not particularly well thought out Ponzi scheme.
There seems to be no saving him now, and I'll certainly miss him.
Before Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, there was Fred Edelstein, a fairly unremarkable newspaperman who bounced around from paper to paper after graduating from Penn State. Unbeknownst to him, or really anyone else, the not-so-intrepid reporter would forever alter the NFL media landscape, only he's not a part of the revolution. Despite being a football first mover when it comes to newsletters, TV spots, even the internet, Edelstein vanished from public purview in around 2003 because he was in jail. His downfall would be scamming the very thing that made him famous in the first place, the National Football League. We start in 1983 with the creation of Edelstein's Pro Football Insider newsletters. In its early days, this is the de facto unofficial NFL trade magazine. Edelstein had connections in some league circles. He was on speaking terms with GMs and agents, eventually owners, and he would collect information and rumors and publish them in the newsletter. Some opine that he was also making stuff up, but the thing was, Edelstein was right more often than he was wrong. Now, not by a huge amount, but still there was value in what he was doing. His engaging style and just the way he presented himself, he was always sort of seen as this flashy caricature of a human being, always talking a big game, very loud, very boisterous, very funny. There was something about him that drew everyone, and not just fans and not just general managers, but owners. Owners were regularly communicating with Fred Edelstein. However, the average person probably didn't know a whole heck of a lot about him. I mean, Edelstein occasionally did a TV appearance here and there, but it wouldn't be until 1989 when his profile would truly take off. A chance run-in with ESPN during the owners' meetings in Chicago saw him disclose to the world his true insider status. So at this meeting, the league was picking a successor to Pete Rozelle, the then commissioner. Having spoken with just about everybody in the know, he came to the conclusion it was Paul Tagliabue and not the other candidates who had a leg up in the running. So when he told that to ESPN, like, hey, I think I know who the next commissioner is going to be, they put him on TV. Now, there was a catch. He just saw this as an opportunity to plug his newsletter to a much larger audience. However, when it turned out he was right and the unfancied Paul Tagliabue was named commissioner, ESPN took notice of this. He starts working for the worldwide leader more often. He's there on NFL draft coverage. He's featured on the multi-hour NFL Game Day. However, he's only on the studio show for a single season, and after that first year, he begins to slowly slide down the ESPN totem pole. Instead of being on ESPN Game Day, the NFL studio show, he finds himself doing spots on SportsCenter. Make no mistake, this is the original NFL rumors guy. Well, that and his hatred for Rich Kotite is infamous at this point.
Because I take so many shots at Richie, I'm often asked if I feel guilty about it. Not at all.
Edelstein is without question the original NFL insider, while Adam Schefter is renowned for his contactless and cell phone. Back in these days, it was Edelstein and his Rolodex, because he had the inside line to every owner, general manager, front office person in the NFL. And this meant he had a steady stream of insider information to share with viewers. Oftentimes, though, he was misleading or downright wrong, and that saw the audience become somewhat skeptical of him. And then in 1991, ESPN hires an insider who is more of a journalist than Edelstein is. Chris Mortensen links up with the network, and he was seen as being far more credible. Of course, he had a very long track record working at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he did more digging than Edelstein did. Edelstein's whole shtick was someone would tell him something, and then he would tell the world that thing. Mortensen was all about sources and trying to get things confirmed. I mean, they both were right and wrong a lot, make no mistake about that, but Edelstein just didn't come off as credible at all. However, early on, the flashiness of Edelstein does get him a lot of TV time, but as Mortensen becomes more comfortable on TV, he develops more of an on-camera presence. You really start to see Edelstein increasingly find himself out of the spotlight. And by the way, it's patently obvious the two did not rate each other at all. They constantly take potshots at one another when Edelstein does leave ESPN. Let's talk about that, shall we? In 1993, Edelstein is coming under fire because he is increasingly incorrect about his various reporting. I mean, Mortensen also wrong, but Edelstein's misses were just so painfully obvious, and he was losing trust from those within the network. Now, not everything was a swing and a miss. He was there when the NFL awarded Charlotte an expansion franchise, but the general consensus was they didn't really need Edelstein and Mortensen. Of course, the former is doing all of his other stuff. He's got his newsletter. He's doing radio spots. In fact, even at this time, he's doing a question and answering session for a bulletin board service on the internet. But there is one reality for everyone to see as it relates to Fred Edelstein. He is undoubtedly the most connected individual to NFL circles, from the tippy top of owners all the way down to agents and players. If you needed to get a hold of someone in the league, Edelstein was your guy. Basically, anyone with an agenda in the NFL knew they could call up Edelstein and give them some morsel of information, and he would turn around and tell the world what that was. And if the rumor was juicy enough, he'd broadcast it on ESPN and not just stick it in a newsletter. That was sort of how everyone knew he worked. The network would show him the door right before the start of the 1994 season, which is kind of sucky timing. Edelstein, doesn't really land on his feet. He ends up doing the New Sport channel, which is also the sports channel. I'm not going to get into it. It's a mess. He's also doing a lot of segments on New Sport Talk with Chet Kopik, who is an interesting character in his own right. One of the first ever sports reporters and sports talk shows out there to interview wrestlers. Eventually, Edelstein gets his goal and lands his own show. The issue is this is more of a syndicated shindig where it's just sent out to New Sport or Prime Sports or Sports Channel affiliates, and they can run it just about whenever the hell they feel like it. And boy, did they take the network up on that offer. This thing is almost never in prime time, and it's not unusual to see it at some ungodly hour of the morning. The further outside of the spotlight Edelstein becomes, the more, I don't want to say desperate, but the less he's verifying things, even less than the almost no verification he was doing before. The most famous example of this was Edelstein going and dying on the hill that the Dolphins would cut Dan Marino early on in the 1997 season. If the future Hall of Famer didn't play well in a Week 6 game against the Chiefs, he was out. Now, Mortensen also reported on this, but everyone locally was just completely dismissing it because there was no one else the Dolphins could have put at quarterback who was going to be better than Marino, even though Marino at this time not particularly outstanding under center, but he was the best option they had. And if you listen locally, everyone locally confirmed that this was just a rumor. They didn't know where it got started, and it probably ends up getting started in national circles. Other teams either looking to destabilize the Dolphins or maybe looking to land Marino themselves were telling Edelstein and Mortensen, hey, Marino's leaving the Dolphins, but everyone, again, locally was like, that's not happening. And this, of course, is one of the huge problems when you have a national NFL insider, is they're kind of collecting information from sources that they would think would know had the inside scoop, but maybe they don't. As the 90s progresses, he starts popping up in AOL chat room discussions that are actually promoted. I find this incredibly cool. I mean, yeah, look, around the 2000s, I was all about chat rooms as well, so that's probably why I think it was cool. And I can't imagine he's being hugely popular, but it was something he was doing to still keep his name out there, even if by the year 2000, he is on the fringes of football and professional sports. No better example of this than him ending up on PAX for the eSports Edge show, 8:30 a.m. Sunday mornings. Just your run-of-the-mill sports gambling show on an uber-religious Christian television network that was basically showing Touched by the Angel nonstop. Well, that and Supermarket Sweep and Shop Till You Drop. I'm going to spare you the in-depth analysis of PAX's lineup in the year 2000, but this sports gambling show was weirdly out of place apart from the fact it was paid programming, and when PAX wasn't showing television with a slightly religious bend to it, it was taking whoever's money to show whatever they wanted to show you for a half hour. Honestly, I'm pretty sure the first, second, and third commandments for PAX television in 2000 were thou shalt run infomercials. This thing, by the way, I actually watched this. My family didn't have cable for around this time, from like 99 to about 01, and desperate for sports. So, hey, a sports show on 8:30. This thing was terrible. It was broadcast in some cheapo casino in Vegas. They couldn't really ever talk about the team. It sucked. I'd argue it was actually worse than having no sports on TV, because it felt like it should have been sports, but it was just a bunch of rubbish. As for Edelstein, he is becoming increasingly lower profile. I mean, when you're on PAX, you are well beyond the fringes of relevancy, yet he's still sort of living this lavish lifestyle that his whole persona is built upon. He's also showing up to various NFL meetings in expensive suits, high-end watches, looking for scoops. Of course, it's not uncommon for people to have side hustles for other ways to generate revenue to allow them to pursue other interests. The thing about Edelstein, though, is his side hustle was actually more like a financial crime. Not only a crime, but he was using his prominence in NFL circles to find both victims and create schemes. On the macro level, 5 charges would be levied against Edelstein from 11 different people, with these totaling nearly $1 million. The problem is the size and scope of Edelstein's scheme is really unknown, because so much of it was done in cash and there are no records of that. The $945,000 mark is simply what prosecutors felt confident they could get a conviction on. Everyone knew that it probably extended far beyond that. Several victims came out and said, well, this is only what we have records of. We did a lot more cash transactions with Edelstein, and we don't have any way to prove that. Anyway, it turns out these criminal activities started the same time Edelstein was being booted from ESPN in '94. He approaches former Philadelphia Eagles linebacker Bill Bergey with a really hot lead on some investment opportunities. There were some stock purchases, a real estate project, a Super Bowl ticket resale scheme that would have been wildly illegal any way you look at it. None of these are real, by the way, but the NFL becomes a critical component of the schemes Edelstein is running. Schemes which are essential for him to both pay back those he took money from earlier and to continue on living lavishly and to be able to sort of be seen in league circles. In 1998, he told One Mark he could get a bunch of Super Bowl tickets, about 50 Super Bowl tickets, from an NFL owner for $50,000. And together they could go in and scalp them for a much higher price. Mike Tice? Oh, wait, that's actually like 4 or 5 years in the future from this happening. What are you gonna do? Anyway, there's another scheme. Edelstein tells a potential victim that there is an owner who desperately needs $25,000 for a surprise birthday party, and he would return the money with handsome interest on top. Must have been some party. Well, if it was real. The worst cons Edelstein eventually pulls involves him not just name dropping people he knew, but getting them to become unknowingly supportive of his various cons. He'd use them to promote a fake venture, but he kind of had an ace up his sleeve, because before he started the fake venture, he actually went to a lot of prominent NFL figures. San Francisco 49ers owner Eddie DeBartolo, Carmen Policy, who was president and CEO of the 49ers before taking the same role with the Cleveland Browns in 1998, famed NFL agent Lee Steinberg, and Miami Dolphins head coach Dave Wanstead. He went to all of them with a sob story. He needed money to take care of his family and that he just needed a loan. He'd pay them back, and they all give Edelstein money. DeBartolo hands him a check for $100,000. Wanstead gives him $70K. However, these checks, which are supposed to go to helping the NFL Insider, or actually used to make it seem like they are supporting other things he's doing in life. He showed people the check from DeBartolo and told them it was for a real estate thing in San Francisco. Steinberg gave him money for a project and that they could also invest with them on said project. He was using their name and generosity to scam others. Oh, by the way, he does cash all of these checks and never pays back a dime to anyone. Alongside Berge, other notable pro football figures to have lost money were agent Eugene Parker and Mark Gannis, who worked on a lot of NFL stadium projects around this time. He was constantly flipping through his NFL Rolodex to build and execute this very loosely constructed Ponzi scheme. It just sort of grew over time. It wasn't like Bernie Madoff, where there was a huge mastermind plan, but he just kept borrowing money and then he needed to keep borrowing money, and it probably got away from him, but it was still such a shitty thing to do. And it wasn't just those in pro football circles who were duped by Edelstein. His dry cleaner lost more than $200,000. The cherry on top of all of this, Edelstein also writes almost $2 million worth of bad checks. Oh yeah, he's also check kiting like crazy in 2000 and 2001. Actually, the charges are filed against Edelstein, and he's still check kiting after the fact. Like, dude could not help himself. The thing is, Edelstein had this dynamism and this personality that, for whatever reasons that are beyond me, everyone kind of lets him off the hook. DeBartolo, Lee Steinberg, they go on record to say they don't want the money back. They don't care about it. Even Mark Gannis, who wasn't as well off as they were like, well, I like the money back, but I don't want to see Edelstein end up in jail. The weirdest twist in all of this, Edelstein is still putting out his newsletter up until he's sentenced. He pleads guilty in 2002, but he has one last Hail Mary left to run. In a bid to get out of serving any jail time, Edelstein comes to the judge with all of these letters from NFL teams saying that they're going to employ him. Each one was going to bring him on as a media consultant and give him $1,500 a month. And his argument to the judge is, hey, don't put me in jail. I can be making money. I can help pay off people. And the judge sees right through this. It probably also didn't help that every letter was exactly the same, apart from the team name and the date and the signature and the person signing it being different. With the Hail Mary falling incomplete, Edelstein is sentenced to 21 months in prison, and that is really that. He does his jail time and retreats back into civilian life. Life is what ultimately ended up being Edelstein's undoing. He was more focused on living the high life and being this character of sorts than taking advantage of the natural talents and advantages he had. He was one of the very first, if not the first, to do it, as it would later sort of be seen as the likes of Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport would go on to do. And make no mistake, they probably weren't even as well connected as Edelstein was. He could call up just about any owner he wanted to, any general manager, any team president, any agent, and get the inside scoop on what was happening. And if they called him, they were probably looking to have him spread some false information. But it wasn't even information he was peddling in. Like, he could go and get loans from a lot of people in league circles. That's absolutely wild. Even wilder, he's not even 50 when those fraud charges are first filed. He's actually younger than Chris Mortensen. The difference between the two is Mortensen put in the work. He was never the coolest guy. He was never the flashiest guy out there, but he had a certain believability to him. Now, the public still didn't necessarily like what he was doing, and he was wrong, but there was something you could believe in when it came to Chris Mortensen, and that was a believability Edelstein never ever truly had. That's because at the end of the day, he cared more about looking the part and living the lifestyle. When you look at Fred Edelstein, when you go back and even watch him early on at ESPN, he had the trappings of a star. He could have been huge in the 2000s as the network begins to shift away from the traditional journalist reporting on sources to the pundit, the talking head. Fred Edelstein was an early version of Stephen A. Smith, and there is so much time for the network to fill in the 2000s. They needed people like him to talk, to have connections, to have sources, and to be able to bring stories right, wrong, fictitious, fabricated, whatever the case may be. Fred Edelstein could have been so big if he could have just done the work. Instead, he focused on scams and betraying the people who trusted him most. The damnedest thing in all of this, though, is even those people were still willing to give him second, third, fourth chances in life. I mean, forgiveness is one thing, but this was a guy who kind of sold everyone down the river. And for what? To own nice watches and nice suits and to be able to hang out at league meetings? At his core, Fred Edelstein is the NFL insider who used the NFL to create this quasi Ponzi scheme to fund his life and his lifestyle. And when that all went tits up, so did his career. But hey, who needs any given Sunday when you have any given bounce check? Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to know more about why kickers are so good in 2025 and why they have the internet to thank, check out the video in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. And for the wild tale and the tale that has been mostly forgotten about Ontario Smith, you know, the Wizinator, check out the video in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback. And as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.